As the sun dipped behind the tall forest, Adesawa stacked the last of her smoked yams on her roadside stall. The evening air was thick with the smell of cooking fires and dust from the road. Suddenly, a soft, urgent cry pierced the stillness. A child, she thought. Lost. Frightened. Somewhere deep in the forbidden forest where no child ever went. Adesawa's heart clenched tight in her chest. She took one step forward, then another. The cry was moving deeper into the trees. Then it stopped. Just like that. Complete silence. In its place came something else. A rhythmic knocking. Tap. 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 Like knuckles on wood. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice barely louder than the wind. The knocking stopped. The forest held its breath. Adesawa stood frozen at the edge of the path, her hands trembling. Every villager knew the stories. The forest took things. It never gave them back. But somewhere in those dark trees, something was knocking. And somehow, she knew it was knocking for her. Earlier that day, Adesawa had given her last meal to a hungry traveler. A man with tired eyes and dusty clothes had stopped at her stall. His stomach growled so loud she heard it over the market noise. Without thinking, she wrapped her fufu in soup and handed it to him. "Eat," she said simply. The villagers saw everything. They always did. "Adesawa, you fool," one woman laughed, shaking her head. "Kindness fills no stomach. You'll starve before sunset." Others joined in, their voices sharp with mockery. "Why waste yourself on strangers? Your own belly is empty." Adesawa only smiled, tucking hope deep in her heart where their words couldn't reach. Later, as she swept her stall, she noticed something strange. The traveler was still there. Standing at the edge of the path. Not moving. Just watching her with eyes that seemed too old for his face. Why is he still there? She wondered, a chill running down her spine despite the heat. A brash onlooker named Okon shook his head at her. He was always the loudest voice in the village, always certain he knew better than everyone else. "Adesawa, why waste yourself?" he called out, his voice carrying across the market. "The forest repays kindness with loss." That's what my grandfather said. That's what his grandfather said. Give and you'll lose. Adesawa looked at him, her eyes calm as still water. She nodded slowly but said nothing. Her hand stayed busy, wiping down her stall, arranging the few yams that remained. Words wouldn't change his mind. They never did. That night, she lay under her tin roof listening to the sounds of the village settling into sleep. Dogs barking in the distance. A baby crying 2 huts over. And then something else. A soft wind swirled through her hut, lifting the edges of her wrapper, making the candle flame dance. The wind seemed to have a voice. It moved around her, circling, touching her face like gentle fingers. Then she heard it clearly. Her name. Adesawa. Whispered. Soft. Coming from everywhere and nowhere. The next day, a frail man appeared at her stall. His clothes were worn and patched, his back bent with age or hardship. He pointed at a loaf of bread, his finger shaking. Adesawa wrapped it carefully and told him the price. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin. Adesawa's eyes widened. The coin was larger than any she had ever seen. Gold, heavy, with strange markings she didn't recognize. I can't accept this," she stammered. "It's too much." The man smiled knowingly. His eyes, she noticed suddenly, were not the eyes of a frail old man. They were deep. Endless. Like looking into the forest itself, layer upon layer of shadow and light. "Keep it," he said, his voice stronger than his body suggested. When he left, walking with surprising steadiness, Adesawa noticed something on her table. A small wooden symbol. A leaf etched into a perfect circle. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands. It was warm, as if someone had been holding it for hours. The same carved symbol appeared the next morning on the tree outside her hut. Adesawa stood staring at it, her heart beating fast. The carving was fresh. The wood still light where the bark had been cut away. She touched it gently, tracing the leaf pattern with her finger. "Who did this?" she asked the women gathering water at the well. They looked at the symbol and shook their heads. "No one here," Mama Ngozi said, frowning. "Why would anyone carve on your tree?" Another woman made a sign against evil. "Maybe you shouldn't ask questions," she muttered. That evening, Adesawa sat outside her hut as darkness fell. The symbol seemed to change in the fading light. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks. But no. It was glowing. Faintly. A soft green light pulsing gently. She put her hand over her heart and felt it. The symbol pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Perfectly matched. As if it was alive. As if it knew her. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Adesawa continued her acts of kindness despite the growing unease in her chest. She gave food to hungry children. She helped old Papa Emeka carry his firewood. She offered water to travelers who passed her stall, never asking for payment. Each small act felt important, though she couldn't explain why. The mysterious man watched from a distance. Always the same spot. At the edge of the forest path where the trees began. She would look up from serving a customer and there he would be. Silent. Still. His eyes following her every movement. When she blinked, he was closer. When she looked away and looked back, he had moved to a different tree. But he was always watching. Other villagers never seemed to notice him. Even when Adesawa pointed, they saw nothing. "You're working too hard," they said. "The sun is making you see things." One morning, she woke and walked to her stall as usual. She looked for him at the forest edge. He was gone. Completely gone. Only the symbol remained, carved now on 3 different trees, forming a path. "That man who's been watching," Adesawa said to the market women. "The one with the deep eyes. Where did he go?" The women exchanged glances. "What man?" Mama Ngozi asked. "No one's been watching you, child. You're imagining things." Adesawa felt her grip on reality slipping. She knew what she had seen. For days, that man had stood watching. She had seen him clearly. His face. His clothes. The way he stood. But, he was here. Every day. "You all saw him." They shook their heads, some with pity, others with suspicion. "Maybe you need rest," one said. "Maybe the forest is playing tricks on your mind," another whispered. Adesawa felt gaslit, crazy, alone. But the symbol in her pocket was real. Solid. Warm. That night, she examined the ground near the forest edge. Footprints. Clear, deep footprints pressed into the soft earth. She followed them. They led toward the forest, straight and purposeful. Then, 10 steps from the first tree, they vanished. Just stopped. As if the person had simply lifted into the air. That night, Adesawa's dreams were different. Deeper. More real than any dream should be. She stood in the forest, but the forest was alive in ways she had never imagined. Trees breathed. Roots moved beneath her feet like sleeping serpents. And there, ahead of her, embedded in the trunk of an ancient tree, was a door. The door was made of dark wood, carved with thousands of tiny symbols just like the one in her pocket. But these symbols moved, shifting and changing, telling stories she couldn't quite read. The door itself seemed to breathe. Expanding slightly, then contracting, like lungs filling and emptying with air. She reached out to touch it. The moment her fingers made contact, everything exploded into sensation. She could smell earth and rain and something ancient. She could taste copper on her tongue. The door was warm, alive, aware of her presence. Then she woke. Gasping. Sweating. her heart pounding. She lifted her hands to her face and froze. Her fingers smelled of fresh bark. Rich. Green. Unmistakable. She looked at her fingernails in the moonlight streaming through her window. Bark. Stuck beneath every nail. Real bark from a real tree. Birds fell silent as she walked toward the edge of the forest the next day. Odessawa noticed it immediately. The usual chatter and singing just stopped. One moment, the air was full of sound. The next, nothing. As if someone had covered the world with a heavy blanket. She took another step. The silence deepened. Then the leaves began to move. Not from wind. There was no wind. The leaves on the trees closest to her bent. Slowly. Deliberately. Bending toward her like curious faces turning to watch. She stopped walking. The leaves stopped moving. She took a step. They bent closer. A faint knocking echoed from somewhere deep within the trees. Tap. 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 The same rhythm from that first night. Calling. Beckoning. Her pulse quickened, matching the rhythm. Tap. 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 Her heart answered the forest's call. Am I ready? She whispered to herself. The leaves trembled. The knocking grew louder. Something was waiting for her. Something patient. Something that had been waiting much longer than her lifetime. And now, finally, she was here. The skeptic Okon ran after her as she moved closer to the forest edge. Odessawa, stop, he shouted, his voice cracking with fear he tried to hide with anger. The forest will consume you. It takes and never gives back. Your kindness is a curse, not a blessing. Turn around before it's too late. The villagers who had followed gathered behind him. They murmured in agreement, their faces tight with worry and suspicion. Listen to Okon, someone called. He knows the old stories. Another voice added, the forest doesn't love kind people. It eats them first. But Odessawa pressed on, one foot in front of the other. She trusted her heart more than their fear. The dreams, the symbols, the knocking, they weren't threats. They were invitations. Her whole life had been preparing her for this moment. She could feel it in her bones. I have to know what waits for me, she whispered, more to herself than to them. The forest seemed to sigh in response. The leaves rustled without wind. The path before her cleared slightly, as if making room. Outside her hut the next morning, Odessawa found something impossible. Food. Arranged in a perfect circle on the ground. Yams, plantains, oranges, and bread. Each item placed with care, forming the same symbol that haunted her dreams. The leaf in a circle. No one was nearby. The village was still asleep, the morning mist thick and gray. She knelt down, touching each item. Fresh. Still warm from someone's hands. Who left this? She called softly. No answer. Just the usual sounds of morning. A rooster crowing. Dogs stretching. The distant sound of someone coughing in their hut. Then she noticed it. A trail. Small pieces of food, broken and scattered, leading away from the circle. Leading straight toward the forest. Breadcrumbs. Literally. Someone had left her a path to follow. An invitation she could choose to accept or ignore. Odessawa stood, her decision made. She gathered the food in her wrapper and followed the trail. Each step felt right. Each step felt like coming home to a place she'd never been. The crumbs led her past the last huts, past the boundary markers, into the forbidden space where villagers never went. For the first time in her life, Odessawa stepped past the boundary her village feared. There was no ceremony, no thunder, no dramatic shift. Just one step, then another. But everything changed anyway. The air grew thicker, heavier, pressing against her skin like warm water. It tasted ancient on her tongue. Old. Layered with centuries of memory. Her senses sharpened. She could hear things she'd never noticed before. The whisper of insects moving through leaf litter. The creak of tree roots deep underground. The breath of the forest itself, slow and patient. Colors became richer. The green of the leaves was not just green but thousands of shades of green, each distinct and alive. She walked deeper, following no path, just intuition. And then she saw it. A door. Standing alone. No wall around it, no building, just a door in the middle of the forest, embedded in the trunk of a tree so old it must have watched the world be born. The door from her dreams. Real. Solid. Waiting. The symbols carved into its surface glowed faintly in the forest shadows. Adesawa stood before the door, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break her ribs. She reached out to push it. The door didn't move. She pushed harder. Nothing. She tried pulling. The door remained sealed, as if it had never been meant to open. Frustration welled up inside her. "Why show me this if I can't enter?" she whispered. Then she remembered. The food in her wrapper. The bread she had gathered from the trail. Almost without thinking, she unwrapped it and placed a piece on the ground before the door. An offering. A gift given freely, expecting nothing in return. The wood grew warm beneath her palm. Heat spread up her arm, not burning but comforting, like holding someone's hand. The symbols began to glow brighter, pulsing with that same rhythm, her heartbeat, the forest's breath, the knock that had called her here. All one rhythm. All one purpose. Slowly, with a sound like a sigh of relief, the door creaked open. Inward. Into darkness so complete it seemed solid. Adesawa took a breath and stepped forward into the unknown. Inside, time stood still. Adesawa's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't breathe. Not because there was no air, but because the air itself had stopped moving. Everything had stopped. She saw them immediately. People. Dozens of them. Frozen mid-motion throughout a vast underground space carved from tree roots and earth. A man with his hand raised, mouth open in a shout that would never complete. A woman reaching for something, her fingers forever inches from her goal. A young man running, one foot lifted, suspended between steps. Their faces were twisted. Some showed fear. Others showed greed, anger, or cruelty. All were trapped in this timeless moment. Adesawa moved through them carefully, her own movements feeling heavy and slow. The frozen figures were villagers, but not from her time. Their clothes were old-fashioned. Their faces weathered in ways modern life didn't create. These were ancestors from generations past, caught here for reasons she didn't yet understand. Then one figure's eyes moved. Just the eyes. Everything else remained frozen. But those eyes blinked, following her as she passed. Aware. Trapped but conscious. A prisoner in their own body. Adesawa stepped closer to the figures, examining their frozen faces. Recognition struck her. These weren't random people. She knew their stories. Every village child learned them. The man who stole from widows. The woman who poisoned her rival's well. The young man who beat his mother and abandoned his family. These were the cruel ones. The greedy ones. The ancestors the village spoke of in whispers, warning children what not to become. They failed. The voice came from everywhere, deep and ancient like the roots beneath mountains. It filled the frozen space, making the very air vibrate. Adesawa spun around, looking for the speaker. She saw no one. Who failed? She asked, her voice small in the vastness. What did they fail? They sought the door, the voice answered. They found it. But they came with empty hearts and grasping hands. They came seeking power, wealth, immortality. They came taking, never giving. So the forest took them instead. Trapped them. Preserved them. A warning to those who would follow. Adesawa felt the weight of generations pressing down on her shoulders. "And me," she whispered. "Why am I here?" Only a pure heart may succeed where they failed. The frail traveler appeared before her. But he was no longer frail. His back was straight, his shoulders broad. His worn clothes had become robes of deep green that seemed woven from forest itself. Power radiated from him like heat from a fire. His eyes, those endless forest eyes, fixed on her with ancient wisdom. "Adesawa," he said, and his voice was the voice that had spoken from everywhere. The voice of the forest itself. "You have been chosen to see the truth. To understand what these others could not." Her heart pounded. Her mouth was dry. "Chosen," she managed to say. "I'm nobody. Just a girl with a roadside stall. I'm not special. I'm not powerful. I don't understand why." He held up one hand, silencing her gently. "You are more than you know. For weeks, I walked among you. I watched. I tested. Every act of kindness you performed, I saw. When you gave your last food to a stranger. When you helped the elderly. When you offered water freely. You never asked what you would gain. You never calculated the cost. You simply gave because giving was right." Adesawa remembered each moment. The hungry traveler. Papa Emeka's firewood. The water for dusty travelers. Small acts. Nothing special. "Everything you did was seen," he continued. "Everything mattered. I am the guardian of balance," he explained, his voice echoing through the frozen space. "Bound to this forest since before your ancestors' ancestors walked these paths. My purpose is singular, to test humanity's heart through acts of kindness, to reward only those who give freely, expecting nothing in return." Adesawa listened, her mind struggling to understand. The others, he gestured to the frozen figures, they heard stories of the door. Legends of wishes granted, power bestowed, immortality achieved. They came seeking to take. One brought gold to buy his way through. Another brought weapons to force entry. Another brought tricks and lies. All brought their greed. But none brought kindness, Adesawa whispered, understanding dawning. "None," he confirmed. "They sought to take from the forest. You sought nothing. You simply gave. Every day. Every moment. Not because you wanted to pass some test you didn't know existed. But because giving was your nature. That is why the door opened for you. That is why the forest called your name." He moved closer. "Every small act you performed was watched. The forest sees all. It knows the difference between kindness for gain and kindness for its own sake. You never knew I was testing you. That's precisely why you passed." "Now comes your choice," the guardian said, his expression growing serious. "To break the cycle, to free these trapped souls and restore balance to your village, you must give up something precious." Adesawa's mind raced. What did she have? A small stall. A tin-roofed hut. A few yams. Nothing precious by most standards. But then she understood. The sacrifice wouldn't be material. It would be something deeper. Her normal life. Her simple existence. Her anonymity. "What must I give?" she asked, her voice steady despite her fear. "I cannot tell you," the guardian replied. "The sacrifice must come from your own heart. You must choose freely, without knowing exactly what you'll lose. That is the nature of true giving, offering without calculating the cost, trusting without guarantee of reward." Adesawa closed her eyes. Her whole life had prepared her for this moment. Every act of kindness had been practice for this decision. She thought of the frozen figures, trapped for generations. She thought of her village, struggling, suffering. She thought of future children who might face this same test. Without hesitation, she nodded. "I agree. Whatever I must give, I give it freely." The door began to tremble. The moment Adesawa spoke her agreement, everything changed. The frozen space erupted into motion. Roots that formed the walls and ceiling began to move, writhing like living things. They weren't threatening, they were celebrating. Light flooded in from everywhere and nowhere, warm and golden like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. The frozen figures began to change. Their solid forms softened, becoming translucent. Like ice melting, like mist forming, they started to dissolve. But there was no fear in their faces now. Only peace. Only relief. Centuries of imprisonment ending in a moment of grace. One by one, they faded completely, released at last from their frozen prison. The space grew brighter with each disappearance until Adesawa had to shield her eyes. The light was inside her too, she realized. Filling her chest, her limbs, her mind. She felt herself being lifted, not by hands but by something gentler. The forest itself was embracing her, thanking her, changing her. She heard voices, ancient and joyful, speaking in languages she didn't know but somehow understood. Blessings. Gratitude. Welcome. The guardian stood before her, smiling, as everything dissolved into pure light. Adesawa woke lying on soft grass at the village edge. The door was gone. The guardian was gone. The underground chamber with its frozen prisoners all gone. Only the forest remained, silent and still as it had always been. She sat up slowly, her body aching as if she'd walked for days. Had it been real? Had any of it been real? She looked at her hands. They seemed the same. She felt her face, her arms, her body. Everything appeared unchanged. But something fundamental had shifted inside her. She felt hollower. Emptier. As if some essential part of her had been given away in that moment of sacrifice. "What did I lose?" she whispered, tears starting to fall. She felt the absence of something but couldn't name what it was. The sacrifice had been taken, the price paid, but she didn't yet understand what she had given up. Then she heard them. Drums. The deep ceremonial drums the village only beat for important occasions. Births. Deaths. Celebrations. The rhythm was joyful, calling everyone together. The sound grew louder, more insistent. Something had happened. Something had changed. Adesawa walked back into the village on shaking legs. What she saw made her stop in her tracks. Everything had changed. The dusty paths she'd walked her entire life were now green with grass. The dry well in the village center was overflowing with crystal clear water. Gardens that had struggled with scraggly plants now burst with vegetables and fruits, heavy and ripe. Children ran past her, laughing in ways she'd never heard, full-bellied laughter, the sound of happiness without hunger behind it. Women gathered water at the well, their faces bright with amazement. "It happened overnight," one said. "We went to sleep in dust and woke to paradise." Men stood in their fields, tears streaming down their faces as they touched crops that had grown to full harvest in a single night. The village elders gathered under the big tree, whispering urgently. Mama Ngozi saw Adesawa and beckoned her over. "Child, something miraculous has occurred. Our village has been blessed. The ancestors have smiled upon us." Others nodded, attributing the change to luck, to divine intervention, to anything but the truth. Adesawa said nothing. She knew. Her kindness had changed the world around her. But the knowledge sat heavy in her chest. Okon, the skeptic, approached her slowly. The man who had mocked her kindness, who had warned her against the forest, who had called her foolish for giving freely. His eyes were different now. Humbled. Broken open by understanding that came too late. He stopped before her and did something no one expected. He knelt. In the dust. In front of everyone. "I see now," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You were right. All along. You were right." Tears glistened in his eyes, catching the sunlight. "I spent my whole life holding tight to what I had, afraid to give, afraid to trust. I called it wisdom. I called it being smart. But it was just fear. Just selfishness. He looked up at her. Your kindness saved us. Your trust broke the curse I didn't even know we were living under. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't understand. Adesawa helped him stand, her hand gentle on his arm. You understand now, she said softly. That's what matters. Around them, other villagers had stopped to watch. Some cried. Some nodded in recognition of their own blindness. The village was changing in more ways than one. The forest stirred once more. A soft wind blew through. The trees seemed to approve. The traveler appeared one final time. In the center of the village. In his full form as the guardian of balance. The villagers gasped and drew back in fear and awe. His presence filled the space, ancient and powerful and utterly beyond their understanding. I am the guardian of balance, he proclaimed, his voice carrying to every corner of the village. Bound to test humanity's heart through trials of kindness. For generations, I have walked among you. For generations, I have watched and waited for one pure heart. One person who would give without counting the cost. He turned to Adesawa. Many found the door. Many sought to pass through. All failed because they came seeking to take power, wealth, immortality, knowledge. They brought offerings meant to purchase favor. But the forest cannot be bought. Balance cannot be manipulated. Only freely given kindness opens the door. He bowed to her. The guardian of balance bowed to a simple village girl. You never sought the test. You never knew it existed. That is why you passed. Your kindness was real, not calculated. Your giving came from your nature, not from strategy. You are what humanity should be. The villagers watched in stunned silence as their world shifted beneath them. Your reward, the guardian continued, is not what you might expect. I offer you no gold. No powers. No immortality. Those are the rewards the failed ones sought. They are empty. Meaningless. They corrupt rather than fulfill. Adesawa waited, her heart steady. She had expected nothing. Wanted nothing. Her reward had already come in seeing the village transformed, the people fed, the children laughing. I offer you guardianship, he said. You will become the unseen protector of this village and all villages connected to this forest. You will ensure that kindness continues to flow, that balance is maintained, that the lessons learned today are not forgotten. You will guide future generations with wisdom and compassion. Not as a ruler. Not as a power. But as a gentle hand steering hearts toward goodness. He placed his hand over her heart. Warmth flooded through her. Understanding. Purpose. Connection to something vast and eternal. You will live a normal span of years. You will marry, have children, grow old. But your influence will echo through generations. Your kindness will ripple forward, inspiring others long after your body returns to dust. A child approached the forest edge, curious. Adesawa smiled knowingly. Her work was beginning. Adesawa stopped the child gently, kneeling to meet her eyes. The little girl reminded her of herself years ago. Curious, innocent, ready to discover the world. What were you seeking in the forest? Adesawa asked softly. I heard a knock, the child said. Like someone calling me. Adesawa smiled, understanding completely. The cycle was continuing. New tests would come. New hearts would be challenged. But now someone would be there to guide them. The forest does call to special people, she said. But first, you must learn something important. Can you promise to remember? The child nodded solemnly. Kindness is never wasted, Adesawa said, her voice gentle but firm. Even when people mock you. Even when it costs you something. Even when no one sees or appreciates it. Kindness matters. Truth always finds its way to the light. And Justice listens quietly, waiting for the right moment. She touched the child's cheek. When the forest calls you again, you'll be ready. But not today. The child ran off to play, carrying the words with her. The forest slept. The village thrived. And Odessa's heart glowed with quiet pride. She had found her purpose. She had passed the test. She had chosen kindness when it mattered most. What would you have chosen? She whispered to the wind, knowing somewhere, someone was listening.